Thanks, everybody. Thank you for attending PSOSEC 2011, Talos Insights, the State of Cybersecurity. My name is NickBiasini. I am the head of outreach for Cisco Talos. A little bit about me. I've been at Talos now for more than 7 years. I've been in the industry for rapidly approaching 20. I got my start as a SOC analyst working in a 24/7 SOC. Over the years, I've been an analyst, lead analyst, managed teams of analysts. I was an IPS engineer for a while, SIM engineer. I've done policy work. I've basically done everything in security except for write code. Now I manage a team of hunters that go out and do threat research all over the planet. Oh, and I'm based out of Austin, Texas. So howdy, y'all. All right, so let me start off by talking a little bit about kind of where we are, the state of cybersecurity as we see it now. Unfortunately, it's kind of a bleak place. There's lots of things going on right now. We still have this constant drone of the script kiddies and the low-level criminals that are still running very unsophisticated criminal cyber campaigns, right? We're seeing those campaigns running around the clock. But more recently, we've seen increased attention from nation states with the highest usage of 0 days actively used we've seen in the last probably decade. We're seeing more and more abuse of supply chains, and we have ransomware cartels doing unauthorized pen tests on networks all over the world, inflicting hundreds of millions of dollars in damage. It's kind of a bleak place to be out there, and as you all know, I always say this: offense is easy, defense is hard. Offense, you have to be right once. Defense, you have to be right every time. So we're kind of in a tough spot, but let me talk to you a little bit about what we're seeing and kind of what Talos is and what we do. So I'll start kind of quick overview of what Talos does. So this is how Talos is constructed. There's 6 groups up there. The group that I'm a member of is Talos Threat Intelligence and Interdiction. Our goal is primarily doing threat research, right? But we have that interdiction in there. We like to get in the way. So what I mean by that is like a simplistic example. You have an adversary running a campaign. He's using a domain generating algorithm or a DGA, right? We reverse engineer the DGA, find out what domains we're gonna use in the future, and then we register every single one we can find. It just slows down their capabilities. It's not gonna stop anybody necessarily, but it allows us to get in the way. That's the type of stuff we're doing all the time. One of the other groups up here that you guys are actually all familiar with, I'm sure, whether you realize it or not, is the Detection Research Group. The biggest thing that they're responsible for is if you have a Cisco security product, it blocks something. Odds are the rules that are triggering that is coming out of this particular organization. This is a group that's made up of malware analysts, reverse engineers, experts in every different type of technology or malware family you can think of. The reason they do that is they really need to be on the cutting edge, because make no mistake, this is a battle. We watch adversaries go back and forth. We evolve protections, they evolve their malware, we evolve our protections. In order to keep up that cadence, you really need that deep technical understanding of how these threats are constructed, how the malware operates, to quickly identify how it's changing and evolving. One of the other groups that is increasingly important to us is our engineering and development group. The reason that is important is these are the software developers that are writing the engines in our security products. Because we are a threat intelligence organization, more than 400 individuals strong, we're able to kind of drive the engine creation by what we're seeing on the threat landscape. Because we are looking at the bleeding edge of what's going on all the time. And we can go to our development teams and say, okay, look, we're seeing this particular vector, this particular file type really being exploited. It's worth it for us to start work on an engine to detect it. And since we control those organizations, we can actually push those buttons and make it happen. One of the other groups we have up here that is increasingly important and not really that well known is our Vulnerability Research and Discovery Group. So this is a team of vulnerability researchers, 0-day threat hunters, if you will. What they're doing is looking for bugs in software. They're looking in commercial and open source software, working with the vendors, doing coordinated disclosure, and getting those issues resolved. In some cases, we're able to build protections into our products before the patches are available because we are working through that disclosure process. But more importantly, every vulnerability we can find, we can report, and we can get patched is one less vulnerability that an adversary can use. We also use that information and the data that they're able to derive to educate our own software development teams to make sure that they write code in as secure a manner as possible. One of the other things that comes out of that and kind of ties into our strategic planning and communications group is we have a huge commitment to open source. We release a ton of reports, our blogs, our IOCs. We release all that stuff publicly. We release a huge amount of tools and portals for people to be able to use to look up information on hashes, domains, IP addresses. We have a huge commitment to community, and that's part of what strategic planning and communications does. Additionally, they take a lot of the content that comes out of our organization, whether through their organization or through my particular team, and help amplify that. They get the message out into the public, they get it more in front of our customers and to our employees inside of Cisco to kind of give us a better understanding and a better visibility into the content that we create. The last group I'll talk about here is probably the most recent addition, that is our incident response offering. We do have a full Cisco Talos incident response organization that has a lot of benefits for us. They have the ability as incident responders to work directly with our threat researchers. So if they see a piece of malware, an IP, a domain, they can pass it off to one of us for us to be able to enrich and tell them the information that we know from our ongoing research, potentially giving them information on targeting, what actors are potentially associated with it, what types of malware families are associated with it, that type of information. Additionally, because we do have incident responders on the ground, we're able to pull all of that incredibly valuable information from the incidents that they're triaging to help understand what our customers actually experience during an incident. From our perspective, a lot of what we're doing is looking at threats at scale. We're not looking at individual compromises, and this allows us to gain that knowledge irrespective of that. But the incident response offering is also a lot more than just incident response. We've expanded it to include things like red teaming, pen testing, intelligence on demand, which is a pretty cool offering we have now, in addition to all the tabletop and policy exercises. So it is a full-fledged services and incident response offering that's part of our team now. So one of the things that really drives Talos is our ability to kind of create what I like to call a very tight feedback loop in the way that we produce coverage. It's a combination of three key things: our visibility, the way that we're able to produce actionable intelligence, and the collective response we're able to provide for big incidents that are going on. So if you look a little bit of our unmatched visibility, we're pulling data from a wide variety of different sources, right? We have some that's coming from product telemetry. We have the data that we're deriving from our threat researchers, from our vulnerability researchers. We have highly customized honeypot network that's globally distributed that we're pulling data in. We have data sharing relationships with a huge amount of organizations, government entities, law enforcement, other vendors in the security space, so that we are able to share information in a timely and effective way and continue to build the data set that we have. But everybody has data. What's more important is how you make use of it, right? And that's one of the places where we really start to stand out. So what we try to do with our intelligence, instead of providing a feed or something like that, we try to make it actually an actionable thing. So instead of getting a feed, instead something gets blocked. Instead of getting an IP address, we just block connections. We block hashes. We apply our intelligence in as many different ways as we can, whether it's heuristic, specific to the threat, whether it's blocking IPs, domains, whatever we can do to provide the intelligence in an actionable way. Additionally, it's not just our ability to provide coverage in our products, right? We have an incident response team. We have people that are gonna go out and work with you. They can do proactive work. They can do reactive work. They can help you make sure that you have the plans in place that you need to succeed. And that's really what it's all about, right? It's not just about producing coverage. It's about trying to help you succeed in this battle that we're constantly going through between us and the adversaries that are out there. So this is what we end up doing with a lot of our time. For us, known is a lot easier, right? If it's known good and it's known bad, I can make a decision and do what I need to do. The hard part is taking that unknown and driving down that number as much as we can. So a lot of our focus is taking that small delta of unknown that we have, really trying to understand how it works, what it's trying to do, is it malicious or is it not, and then push as many different types of coverage into as many different products as we can. Okay, so that was my quick overview of kind of what Talos does and what role we play in all of this. Now let me kind of talk to you about where we are on the threat landscape and the things that are most concerning for me. And I'm going to start by talking about vulnerabilities. I just mentioned the fact that we had more 0 days than we've seen in a while. In 2021, we had more 0 days exploited in the wild than we did in 2020 and 2019 combined. This is a trend that continues to accelerate. There are more and more people doing vulnerability research and more weaponized exploits for sale on the open market. So let's talk about a couple of examples of things that have happened in the last year or so that have kind of brought this to the forefront. The first thing I'll talk about is Hafnium. Hafnium is the name of an actor group that used several vulnerabilities in Microsoft Exchange. What's interesting about this is not so much the vulnerabilities, but it's kind of what happened in the process. So this group did highly targeted attacks using these vulnerabilities, and then 1 or 2 days later, proof of concept code or POC code leaked out on the internet. Then everyone started using it, and all of a sudden there was exploitation going on across the globe at all different levels. What's interesting is what that does, right? We don't know if this was intentional or accidental. There are tons of vulnerability researchers. It is entirely possible that you had multiple groups finding the same vulnerability and it just happened that the dates coincided. But the next time, it won't be an accident. Because what they see is, if I really have something very high target, the best way for me to make sure that I can get through and stay and do what I need to do is send every other cyber actor in the world going wild on the same vulnerability. Because now you have 47 different times that your system was exploited. How are you supposed to quickly identify which one of those was the nation state and which one was just trying to drop a crypto miner on your box? So now you have incident response teams working overtime. You have security analysts stressing out over trying to figure out what compromise was associated with what, and it really clouds the ability not only for them to be able to really do damage, but how are you going to be able to attribute it cleanly? How do you know who did what if there's 4 people in there making and running commands? It's a very, very interesting evolution and something that definitely is going to change the way that we see these types of vulnerabilities potentially used in the future. The other thing that we saw a lot of, I mean, I'm sure we're all familiar with Log4Shell and the horrible experience that was. Quick story, I had the best timed PTO in the world, ended up sitting on an airplane the morning that Log4Shell dropped without my work laptop. So I ended up having the most properly timed PTO in the world. What was bad about this vulnerability is not just the severity, but it was the ease with which it could be exploited and the way that it truly changed triaging of vulnerabilities in organizations. So what do I mean by that? What we typically would do in an organization, if you have a high severity vulnerability, what is the first thing you're looking to patch? Internet-facing systems, because those have the biggest attack surface. Those are the ones that attackers are going to launch packets at and immediately compromise, right? That's not unexpected behavior. But Log4j really changed everything because it's a logging library. Now you have this weird situation where it's not just the edge systems that you have to be careful about. Because now you have those edge systems, if you're configuring your systems properly, what is one of the things that they're definitely going to be doing? Logging. Because you actually need to see what's going on those end systems, what types of requests are happening, what type of activity is going on. And if you're logging those requests, odds are those logs are getting parsed somewhere. And if those logs are getting parsed in 2021, odds are that parsing library was Log4j. So as you can see, now you have this problem where an attacker would attack the internet-facing systems, compromise the internet-facing systems, and then a few minutes, a few hours, even a day later, suddenly they'll get additional call-outs coming out from inside the network. What's happening is, as that log file is making its way through the network, it's proceeding to continue to compromise system after system after system. And then what you end up with is a whole bunch of compromise on systems that you typically wouldn't think of it. There's a great way to kind of realize how bad the severity of this is. Somebody pointed out that this theoretically could be the first exploit that could be triggered by printing it on a shirt. So if you had a camera that happened to take a picture of that shirt and it gets passed to a library that's doing OCR and is resolving the text and is logging that information, it would then get compromised by Log4j. That's how severe this type of vulnerability is. So what does this mean for defenders? Hafnium and Log4j are just two in a bunch of examples of vulnerabilities that we see attacked and abused often. Both 0 days and N days are going to be and continue to be problems, especially as we continue to see vulnerabilities in very widely used libraries. Log4j is one vulnerability, but the cascading vulnerabilities that follow afterwards could extend for weeks or months as different products identify the fact that they do have Log4j installed, they do actually have a patch available, and they've resolved the issue. So even though a library may be patched, it does not mean that the attack surface for it is gone. In fact, in a lot of cases, if it's a very widely used library, the cascading impacts are going to be devastating. One of the other things is this brought to the forefront this concept of a software bill of materials. I don't know if all of you are familiar with SBOMs yet, but if you aren't, you probably will be in the next several months. The basic concept here, this is incredibly important specifically for internally developed applications, right? The idea being, I'm going to keep a list of all the libraries and all the packages that I use in my software and the versions that I'm using. So when the next Log4j happens, instead of me running around with my hair on fire trying to exploit the systems inside my network, I can actually just go pull up this document, figure out if the library is there, is the version that I'm using vulnerable? Okay, let's start the process to start triaging it. Additionally, talking to your vendors, do they have an SBOM? It's not necessarily super useful for you, but it does give you that indicator of trust to say that yes, my vendor is actually concerned about these types of vulnerabilities. They're going to be in a better place the next time this happens to be prepared to respond and tell me whether or not this vulnerability impacts them much, much quicker. And it also talk to them about their patching process for this, right? Have they changed their passing process coming out of this? What did they learn from this vulnerability? Because this is definitely one of the things that really changed the way that organizations look at patching. Again, asset identification, I'm going to harp on this a lot, but it is really hard to secure a system you don't know exists, especially with a vulnerability like this. You can't protect a system from being attacked from Log4j if you don't know it's deployed on your system or in your network, and you also don't know who to contact to talk to about it. You can have a server, but if you don't know who to go to say, what's running on this? What is this used for? How can I find out if it's vulnerable? You really need that type of information. And I know it sounds counterintuitive, but logging is super important. Even though this was a logging vulnerability, it's really hard to get visibility into what's going on end systems if you don't have some sort of logging or like EDR, XDR capability that really gives you that same type of deep visibility. Okay, so let's switch up a little bit and talk supply chain. This has continued to be very, very widely abused, primarily but not exclusively by nation states. The most common way that we see supply chains abused is in the software supply chain. Basic idea here is adversary compromises the software development environment for a particular vendor. They hide a backdoor into the source code. That source code is then distributed to customers. This initial backdoor is usually extremely lightweight. The goal being to learn very, very simple pieces of information, like where am I? What network am I joined to? What's my IP address? What types of software is installed? The real goal here is basically reconnaissance. They want to know what system am I on? Is this a system I want to deliver an additional payload to? That's basically the way that they're able to compromise a huge amount of systems without having to really expose what the real malicious intent was in the attack. So let's talk about some examples. SolarWinds, everybody is pretty familiar with that. I'm not going to so much talk about the specifics of SolarWinds, but why it is overwhelmingly important in the landscape of supply chain attacks. First and foremost, the software that was targeted. We saw this in CCleaner. We continue to see it again and again. Software supply chain is great. It's a very effective attack vector, but not all software supply chain attacks are the same. In the end, it depends what systems and users you're compromising when you're actually running your software supply chain attack. So by targeting a program that's used for monitoring of networking and end system devices, you are going to be running on very high privileged systems. The users that are going to be using it are likely going to be very highly privileged. So you already are gaining a high level of access without having to do a ton of additional work and raise a bunch of additional alarms. Secondly, the thing that they were targeting more than anything else was SAML tokens. That is a very, very important thing to take away. SAML tokens are being targeted for a variety of reasons. First and foremost, today's enterprise is hybrid. right? You're either in one or more clouds and you have on-prem equipment. Very rarely do you have an organization that has 100% of their assets in the cloud or 100% of their assets on-prem. So what SAML tokens do is they allow adversaries to access both sets of resources with one set of credentials. So now they don't have to worry about, oh no, I have to go get creds to get to access to the info on the cloud. Oh no, I need to go get creds into their domains so that I can get access onto their end systems. Additionally, the fact that they aren't just targeting sorry, I lost my train of thought there. They aren't just targeting the software itself, but the SAML tokens can also be used to defeat MFA. Multi-factor authentication is an incredibly effective tool to be used by enterprises to deter adversaries. It's not going to stop everybody, right? It's just not. But what it is going to do is it's going to really slow them down. It's going to make them work a whole lot harder, and hopefully, it's going to give you and your security team the indicators you need to stop the attack from occurring. That's why they're going after SAML tokens, is because it takes that completely out of play. So this just shows MFA works, and adversaries have noticed that it works. So I mentioned before, it's not just criminal or nation states that are doing this, the criminal organizations are involved as well. The Kaseya VSA ransomware attack is probably one of the best examples of that. This is actually pretty interesting because REvil, which was a ransomware cartel, used a series of 0 days. As I mentioned before, 0 days are becoming more widely used. They then compromised Kaseya VSA, which is an MSSP offering, used the service to launch a ransomware attack. So this is the other type of supply chain attack that we see most often is service-based, where they're not necessarily compromising the software, but what they are going to do is use a service that you are taking advantage of and deliver malicious content through it. We also see it in things like Sea Turtle, which was a services supply chain attack against DNS from several years ago. And again, this was used to just deliver ransomware. They didn't have to do anything fancy. They didn't have to compromise anybody. They actually legitimately used the commands associated with the software to just install ransomware on end systems. So again, trust is under attack. Adversaries are going to use your users, your partners, and your vendors against you, especially the more sophisticated adversaries. Multi-factor authentication is absolutely paramount in these types of instances, right? If you have the ability to deploy it widely. Have it on as many different accounts as you can. Where you can't deploy it, make sure you have something to help you have an extra level of scrutiny of those logins. Now, I mentioned ransomware cartels a couple of times. One of the things I want to talk about is what they're basically doing. So what you have here is, as I said before, criminal organizations running unauthorized pen tests on enterprises all over the globe. Their goal is to get into a network. They're going to take advantage of your mistake. They're incredibly opportunistic. They're not usually going after one specific organization. They're just going after whatever organization they can get into. They will literally try everything to get in. They will actively exploit. They will phish you. They will try to buy creds. There's just so many different ways. Once they get in there, they usually have one or two goals. It's usually either data gathering and exfiltration for extortion and ransomware, or ransomware. It's either both or one. We see some groups that just do ransomware, some groups that just do extortion, a lot of groups that do both, but this is the basic behavior of how ransomware cartels are operating, and they are definitely inflicting severe damage on enterprises all over the globe. I mentioned buying access. This is something that I don't think enough people realize is a huge business. Access brokers have existed for a long time, but right now their business is booming. You can go on the dark web and you can buy access into all kinds of different organizations that are out there. If you as an enterprise are not actively looking to see if you have credentials for sale, you should be, because there is a shocking amount of them out there. We see an astronomical amount of info stealers and rats being deployed specifically to set up the access for them to be able to sell to one of these cartels later on. You have to realize not everybody wants to launch a multi-million-dollar ransomware attack. They don't want the attention. So what do they do when they get onto these systems? One of the things that we see more generally is the use of lolbins and lolbos. So that's living off the land, binaries, and scripts. Instead of downloading custom tools, they're going to use the tools that are already on the system. Yes, there's PowerShell, but there's also PSExec, there's WMI, there's certutil, there's ext export, bits admin. All of these are being used every single day by just a huge amount of adversaries. The more things they download, the more opportunity for detection. We also have seen this huge explosion in the use of offensive security tools. Cobalt Strike is everywhere. Everyone is using it. The leaked copies are being used by huge amounts of criminal organizations, but it's a lot more than that, right? There's Cobalt Strike, Metasploit, PowerSploit, PowerShell Empire, Mimikatz. There is a huge industry of offensive security tools. Use that to your advantage. Make sure you understand how these tools operate. Make sure you have protections in place for them. Very important. Some of the other trends that we see out there, business email compromise is probably the most overlooked threat on the landscape today. The amount of damage, financial damage it does completely dwarfs what is done by the ransomware cartels, but it gets far less attention. Collaboration app abuse is rampant. In your organization, if you do not use a collaboration app, please block it. If you don't need it, block it, because they're just very, very, very heavily abused by adversaries. And I mentioned before, info stealers, remote access Trojans. This is the huge wave of attacks that we're seeing now. It's not about trying to deliver a specific malware payload. It's about getting credentials. It's about setting up access, and it's about figuring out how you can monetize that further. One last thing, Talos in Ukraine. This has been a huge part of what we've been doing in Talos over the last 6 months. I have folks on my team that have been deeply involved in the ongoing threat hunting there. We've been in the region for more than 6 years and continue to work 24 hours a day, 7 days a week to try and keep critical systems and resources up and running inside of Ukraine. Like I said, we've been there for a really, really long time. This is another one of those spaces where we're seeing a huge amount of info stealers and rats being deployed. This is just another example of how access is increasingly becoming more and more important, not just for criminals, but also for nation states. Having credentials and getting access is really what the key goal is. Okay. So the last thing I'm going to leave you with today is what can defenders do? I spent a lot of time talking about the chaos that is going on the threat landscape, but what can you do as a defender to kind of help prepare yourself for this? So I kind of put together this fancy pyramid here of things that I think are increasingly important. To me, by far and away, the most important thing on this chart is the thing at the bottom, security fundamentals. Those are the things that you will be leaning on when you have an incident. You're going to have an incident at some point. You are better off having security fundamentals in place. You need to know what your assets are. You need to have good patching procedures. You need to have good incident response plans that are tested. You need to try and implement network segmentation, do proper access control. These are the things that are going to save you in an incident from a bad day to one of the worst days of your career. It really makes a huge difference. I've talked about it a lot, but multi-factor authentication is incredibly important. It really forces adversaries to really up their game and spend a lot more effort to get into your enterprise. It also hopefully will give you the warning signs. I cannot emphasize enough though, if you're deploying MFA, please take the time to educate your users on what to expect and what should be a red flag to them. Far too often we see things like MFA fatigue attacks where they're just sending barrages of alerts at employees and then eventually they just click allow. You have to tell them that that type of thing is not normal and they need to be educated about it. Umbrella is on here largely because I find that to be one of the lightest lifts with the heaviest impact. Almost all malware makes use of DNS at some level, and having that security in place makes a big difference. And then finally, CSE is Cisco Secure Endpoint. This is your last bastion. With the amount of encryption and various other things that are going on the network, this is the one place where you're going to have visibility and where you really, really, really need it. Okay, that is more or less all the content I had today. If you want more of our content, there's a huge variety of places where you can get that content, including on the website, Beers with Talos, podcast, social media, all that fun stuff. We are doing customer testimonials here, video customer testimonials. So if you want to go and talk about how great your experience with Talos is and how awesome Cisco is, you can call the people who are up here, Cindy and Taz. They are doing that, I believe, through tomorrow. And then lastly, Cisco Live is one of the places where surveys really make a difference. Our presentations are rated based on what we do, so if you would take the time to fill out a survey, I'd really appreciate it. Hopefully you learned something and found out something interesting about the threat landscape. Thanks a lot, y'all.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.